I believe in the concept of beshert, not the common language idiom which refers to finding an ideal mate. Beshert, in its original meaning of destiny, in the strict mystical Kabbalistic sense, means destiny. That each of us has multiple paths before us, and the choices we make lead us to seemingly different outcomes, but that there are times when circumstances converge to allow us to accomplish what we were destined to do. Put another way, the finish line is preordained. What condition we will be in when we get there is not. The choices we make on the path will determine how we end up and whether we will be able to appreciate it. Naomi Remen, one of my teachers, told the following account of her early years as a doctor. She was assigned to the wards of Bellevue, the city hospital of New York, and it was her first clinical experience. She wrote, "I was expected to draw all the required blood work. Under the watchful eyes of 50 patients, I would go from bed to bed, and my skills were not very good. I would often have to try 3 or 4 times before I could find the right vein and draw blood. It was painful for them, and it was agonizing for me. So I was working my way down the middle row of beds, and I had just stuck a man for the 3rd time when I sensed someone close behind me. Turning, I found one of the regulars standing there, a big, rough-looking man in a blue patient gown. Without a word, he reached out and picked up one of the unused syringes I had put on the bedside table, and with one hand, he tightened the tourniquet around the arm of the man in the bed, and with the other, he drew blood from it, and he did it in seconds. Trying to hide my embarrassment, I turned and went to the next bed, but he followed me. And he said, "Doesn't anyone teach you kids how to do this?" And I shook my head, and the man in this bed was smiling. He extended his arm and said, "Here, you just try. Larry will show you how to do it." And I tried and missed. And Larry showed me a better way to hold the syringe, and it was much easier. We went on from bed to bed with Larry showing me all the kinds of tricks that I had never seen before. And by the end of the hour, I was drawing every blood sample on the first try. "Not bad, kid," Larry told me, and he walked away back to his bed. Larry came with me every morning at the end of the week. I was able to draw blood I would not have thought possible. Several of the men told me that they could barely feel the needle. The following year, I returned to Bellevue for 3 more months, and this time I was assigned to work in the emergency room. And so I was there the evening that Larry was brought in by the police ambulance, shot to death in a drug deal that had gone bad. And it stunned me. Being very young, I had simply assumed that he must have been an army medic. It never occurred to me to wonder where he had learned to be so skilled with a needle. It's been almost 40 years since I was a student at Bellevue and was touched by Larry's kindness. There have been many times since when my deftness with a needle has made a difference to someone, and there have been a few times in a tight situation when that difference was between life and death. Over the years, I have taught Larry's secrets to hundreds of others, all of my students, and perhaps they have passed them on as well. Once this skill is learned, it's something you never forget, like riding a bicycle. I find myself strangely attached to this story of a person who, despite living a life that led to tragedy, did have that one redeeming moment when he passed on life-saving techniques to a student in need. Think of it. Perhaps for one redeeming moment, he met the person and became the person he could have been. And in that moment, even if only in that moment alone, he was a tzaddik, a righteous person. And I'm attached to it because I have a story of my own. Some of you know that my first pulpit was in Greenbelt. You may have heard of it. Mm-hmm. It's in Prince George's County. You know, that other county? Yeah. During Operation Solomon, when the Jewish community came together to bring the Ethiopian Jews to Israel, a member of my congregation, a man who had been diagnosed with borderline personality and who could barely make ends meet, came to donate his entire life savings of $100. I refused it. This was a man living on soup and crackers the last week of the month because he could not make ends meet, and I often helped him. And his response was, "You cannot refuse me. You said that each $100 saves a life. I've done very little with my life, but I now have the opportunity to save someone, and maybe that's why I was born." A doctor in training is taught by a drug addict. Can we ascribe the lives she saved and the suffering she averted to his credit? Did the choices he made in his life ruin his potential so that his one redeeming action was literally a heaven-sent opportunity? Clearly, he made bad choices in his life, but choice and freedom of choice is what makes us who we are. There is no denying that choice improves the quality of our lives. It enables us to have a measure of control. Choice is essential to autonomy, which is absolutely fundamental to well-being. Healthy people want and need to direct their own lives. But we have also learned that too much choice is not always a good thing. As a culture, we are enamored of freedom, self-determination, and variety, and we are reluctant to give up any of our options. But clinging tenaciously to all the choices available to us can contribute to bad decisions, to anxiety, stress, and dissatisfaction. Freedom has a cost, which is borne by individuals who make bad choices and by a society that feels obligated to help them. The decision of whether or not to protect individuals against their mistakes therefore presents a dilemma, because freedom is not free of charge. And we often make the mistake that freedom requires independence. Freedom does not thrive in a vacuum. It does not require a person to go through life alone. In fact, freedom is best experienced in a supportive environment. It can be a gift bestowed upon children as long as we understand what parenting can be. As we look back on our lives on this day, many of us tend to focus on our parents and what they bequeathed us. One way or another, the amount of freedom we experience as adults is connected to our parents and the dynamic they established in our childhood. But it's important to remember that when it comes to parenting, the practice of framing mothers and fathers as good and bad is both rampant and corrosive. It turns parenting into a shame minefield. The real questions for parents should be, were you engaged? Were you paying attention? And if so, remember that parenting is not perfect. Plan for lots of mistakes and bad decisions. Imperfect parenting moments turn into gifts, as our children will watch us to try to figure out what went wrong and how we can do better next time. The mandate is not to be perfect and raise happy children, because perfection doesn't exist. And I found that what makes children happy doesn't always prepare them to be courageous, independent, engaged adults. We need not face life alone, and we have built-in protections and support, the foundation of which is built on family. My father came home from the trauma of World War II, a changed man. He was complicated, and for the rest of his life, he often made decisions that in retrospect were questionable. And he was anything but perfect. But he wasn't trying to be. He tried to be the best he could with what he had, and I learned that from him. To understand my father or any parent, it is important to know that we all have two families, the one we live with and the other, the one in our mind, called our psychological family. The psychological family is intrinsic in the human psyche. It compensates for loss, a basic feature of human experience. More than simply a collection of remembered ties, the psychological family is an active and effective bond that helps people live with loss and trauma in the present. People cope by holding on to some private perception of home and family. This may coincide or conflict with official records and the physical family one lives with, but who is viewed as being in the family is of therapeutic importance. His belief in family gave him purpose, direction, and hope. Families have built-in mechanisms that are activated whenever family life is disrupted by internal or external forces, behaviors that seem in turn to return the family to its previous state of balance. But while families can build, they can also destroy. Family secrets can rigidify identities. A family may begin thinking that there were never any problems, no drinking, no divorce, no suicide, no incest, no abuse. And they have only told the good stories and glamorized the family identity. As storytelling and restoring proceed, family members hear that grandmother was sent to an asylum, that great-grandfather was in jail, that there might have been a suicide or some drinking and abuse. The reality is that all families have both good and bad in them, and that most of us stand somewhere between those two extremes. Recognizing that most people are both saints and sinners enriches individual and family identity, and it also expands our reservoir of resilience. So how do we reconcile these dynamics? How do we retain our freedom, our independence, when the community and family dynamics work against it? I believe that Yom Kippur is first and foremost meant to help us achieve a balance, to reboot our lives and redirect our energies, to become the person we want to be, the person we were meant to be. And here we are in the sanctuary on Yom Kippur. We're asked to engage in cheshbon hanefesh, literally an accounting of the soul. You know, one of the symbols of this day is the scales of justice, a scale that weighs our good and bad deeds. But it's important to realize that scales do not measure, they compare. In our case, we compare what is good in our lives against what is toxic. If we find that what is negative outweighs all else, how do we change the composition of our lives? There's a Hasidic story about a man who dies, goes to heaven, and is judged, and there are no deeds to his merit. His soul is about to be consigned to the nether regions, when the Rebbe comes forward and reminds God Of the one redeeming action of this man's life, he once stopped his carriage to help a poor man, feeding him and giving him money for support. The Rebbe took the man and placed him on the scales of justice on the positive side, which for obvious reasons did not move the scales in his favor. He then proceeded to place the food, the money, the horses, and finally the carriage on the scale until it tipped into a more positive optic. And in this way, one action redeemed his soul. It's a cute story, but the message is deep and complicated. One act, one cathartic act can change a life. Teaching a medical student the right way to draw blood can be seen as the one redeeming action of a person's life. Contributing one's life savings to save a life can change us in all the right ways. And yet we are so unable to change. We are overwhelmed sometimes by the challenges we face. We'll do almost anything but look at the scales of our lives. Instead, we try every stratagem to deny what is so obvious to others. And until we stop ourselves, or more often have been stopped, we hope to put certain of life's events behind us and get on with our living. But when we take that path, it creates a temporary and unstable dynamic. The longer we live in denial, the more unstable it becomes. And if we are successful in denying, we can be certain it will plague us for a long time and possibly poison our children as well. We live in a culture where it is normal to deny the pain. This raises the question of whether it is ever possible to become free from emotional pain in this life. And the answer is yes, we can, but it will be a much more difficult life than necessary. Only if the suffering is completely accepted can we grow and find balance, for then it loses its stranglehold and it ceases, in a sense, to be suffering. Sometimes time itself is the healing agent. We see that matters that present great problems for a child or in our earlier years and cause great pain may be of no consequence as we get older. However, because there is a vacuum of competence in the world which must be filled, the process of making decisions with total awareness is often infinitely more painful than making decisions with limited or blunted awareness. And so we engage in behaviors that help us to numb and take the edge off our vulnerability, pain and discomfort. Sadly, we cannot selectively numb emotions. When we numb the painful emotions, we also numb the positive emotions. The most powerful emotions that we experience have very sharp points, like the tip of a thorn. And when they prick us, they cause discomfort and even pain. Our first response to vulnerability and pain of these sharp points is not to lean into the discomfort and feel our way through, but rather to make it go away. And we do that by numbing and taking the edge off the pain by whatever takes, whatever provides the quickest relief. And yet, no matter how far we stray from the path, I have found that there is always an opportunity presented that gives us the possibility of redemption, if only we would recognize it. The one action that will open a new door and show us a new way to grow in a healthy manner, to allow us to become who we were destined to be. Denying the pain, numbing us to life, makes it almost impossible to recognize these moments, for we've spent too much time insulating ourselves from life and from others that we rarely see the potential before us. This day is given to us so that we can learn that the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. We burn out not because we don't care, but because we don't grieve. We don't feel. We burn out because we have allowed our hearts to become so filled with loss that we have no room left to care. You grieve because it's of help to you. It enables you to go forward after a loss. It heals you so that you are able to love again. Because problems do not go away. They must be worked through or else they remain. Forever a barrier to the growth and development of the spirit. We must accept responsibility for a problem before we can solve it. We cannot solve a problem by saying it's not my problem. We cannot solve a problem by hoping that someone else will solve it. I can solve a problem only when I say, this is my problem, and it's up to me to solve it. How can we experience life with balance and avoid the vagaries of denial and numbness? By looking for balance, by striving for balance, by accepting that life is broken, and we will experience loss, pain, and suffering, but we will also experience joy, fulfillment, and meaning. And we do this by creating boundaries in our lives, and thereby find the compassion that allows us to fix the world. Compassionate people are boundaried people. The heart of compassion is really acceptance. The better we are at accepting ourselves and others, the more compassionate we become. It's difficult to accept people when they are hurting us or taking advantage of us or walking over us. So we really want to practice compassion. If we want to start practicing compassion, we have to start by setting boundaries and hold people accountable for their behavior, and by not trying to be perfect. Abraham Joshua Heschel, the 20th century philosopher of the conservative movement, in his later years was quoted as saying, "In my early life, I looked for people who were intelligent and sharp. And now in my later years, I look for people who are kind." We should be wary of striving for perfection, because perfection is only an idea. For most experts and many of the rest of us, it has become a life goal. The pursuit of perfection may actually be dangerous to your health. Perfection can break you. It can break your heart and all the hearts around you. A perfectionist sees life as if it were one of those little pictures that used to appear in the newspapers or those magazines for kids over the caption, "What's wrong with this picture?" If you looked at the picture carefully, you would see that the table only has 3 legs or the house has no door. I remember the aha moment that these pictures evoked as a child. But I wonder now why anyone would want to take such satisfaction in seeing what is missing, what is wrong, what is broken. Fortunately, perfectionism is learned and can be unlearned. Perfectionism is not the same thing as striving to be your best. Perfectionism is not about healthy achievement and growth. Perfectionism is the belief that if we live perfect, look perfect, and act perfect, we can minimize or avoid the pain of blame, judgment, and shame. It's a shield. Perfectionism is a 20-ton shield that we lug around thinking it will protect us, when in fact it's the thing that's really preventing us from growing. I've learned several lessons, at least, in my years in the pulpit. One thing I have learned is that it is important to be kinder, because everyone we meet is fighting some kind of battle. And that there are some who may seem as though they have put it all together, but are really just lost. And lastly, finding meaning does not require us to live differently. It requires us to see our lives differently. And in doing so, we can become and remain the person we were meant to be.